Okay, hi everyone. It's 7 o'clock now, so we'll just get started with introductions as more people join us. My name is Jennifer Hill, and I'm Director of Member Engagement at ADHA. I apologize about my voice. I've been sick, so I lost my voice, but hopefully you can hear me. So welcome, and so glad to see you all on tonight for our second webinar in our Member Engagement Chat series with Peggy Hoffman. If you missed the first webinar, we encourage you to check out the link to the recording that we emailed to everyone. And we'll also include that link in the email after this recording as well, so you'll have both. But please go ahead and check that one out if you haven't yet. Also, just a reminder, you can go on now and register for the next two webinars in our series. So be sure to do that and get your spot. So if you were on the last webinar, you already have met Peggy Hoffman, our speaker for this evening. If not, I'll take a quick second to introduce her. Peggy is president of Mariner Management, an association management company, and she also serves as an executive director for one association. In addition to managing organizations, Peggy has provided training and counsel to dozens of global, national, and local membership associations seeking to strengthen member and volunteer engagement. She also led our membership session at the ADHA annual conference last year in Columbus, and she received rave reviews. So we're really happy to have her back to do this webinar series with us, and she really offers some great tips and tricks for chapter leaders, and she really gets your perspective. So we're really happy to have her, and I will turn it over to you, Peggy.
Awesome. Good evening. And Carmen, I'm coming to your place. Anyone who's having a hot toddy with green apple brandy is my kind of person. So welcome, folks. I mentioned that because we have a little bit of a chat going on, and I'm going to encourage you to, as we have our second member engagement chat, that you do use the chat box to share what you're thinking, ideas, questions, and allow this to be a two-way conversation. So one of the things that we asked was, what are you drinking as we gather around the table tonight to talk about how do we help members find their way in our organizations? So this is a really important conversation because if we really want to be successful in having vibrant chapters, we've got to help members find their place in the organization. I'm going to start by asking a really critical question. Just why in the world do people join our organizations? And it's actually, guys, a decision to affiliate. And it's based on the premise that when they affiliate, they're going to be able to create connections. That's connections with peers, with friends, with a professional network. It could be that those connections yield an employee or an employment opportunity, or maybe an effective practice that I take back. Maybe it's a friendship. Maybe it's an opportunity to connect in a deeper way with someone. But the second important thing is access. In some cases, we're talking about access to education. Maybe though it's access to knowledge or ideas, affinity programs, discounts, but very much it's usually an access to fun. So the question I have to ask you is, if this is the reason why they're joining, why are they renewing? Now let me pause and say that actually the decision to join is the easy thing. Getting someone to say yes sometimes may feel tough, but it's really a lot easier. The work begins at this moment. Because you see, once someone says yes, we are now in the process of helping them see the value of the organization in a way that gets them to say yes again 1 year later, 2 years later, 3, 4, 5, and even 10 years later. So what we want to talk about today is how do we create that yes? Now, I will tell you very honestly, this is going to be some work. And that's the reason why I want to ask you, do you know how much more it takes to obtain a member over retaining a member? Let me throw this poll up. Oops, I apologize. Let me end the polling, and we are on 8 o'clock time. Let me go back, and there we go. So how much more does it cost to obtain a member over retaining one? Do you think it's 5 times the cost? Is it 2 times the cost? 7 times? 10 times? How much more does it cost to obtain a member? So what I'm talking about is all the cost and resources to get somebody to say yes. How much more of that than it is all the costs and the resources to get somebody to say yes a second time? I see hands are busy. This is great. Keep moving. So 5 times is the winner so far. We've got a couple people saying 2 times. We've got a number of people saying 10. All right, let me show you what you guys said. So about 55% of you said that it was 5 times. And actually, guys, the correct answer is close to that, but it's more than that. It's 7 times. So about 6 of you were absolutely correct. It is 7 times the cost to get a member than to retain. Now, why would I show you this? Well, I would show this to you simply because I want you to understand that the true benefit is once someone says yes, the true benefit is us taking the time to get them to connect to the organization, to say yes a second time. And the true value of this is that just by getting someone to engage, their net promoter score will jump 6 points. So if you say, well, Peggy, the effort's going to yield a yes a second time, absolutely, because what we're talking about is engagement. And when we engage somebody into our chapter, our state organization, people feel that loyalty and they will say yes the next time. So how are we going to make this happen? We're going to make this happen when we help them map their membership. So this is really kind of onboarding, but what I really call it is, it's a very warm welcome. It's helping people feel like we've opened up the door, we're inviting them into our home, and inviting them into their home, we're making them feel comfortable. Now, let me ask this question before we go into what onboarding is. I'm interested in knowing which of these typical onboarding steps you would use. Would you, do you, and check as many as you want, offer a welcome email? Do you offer new member packet or mailing? Do you give them a call? Do you email instructions on how to access benefits? Do you do a personal invite to the next meeting? How about an interview? What about a check-in call 3 months later? What about a check-in call maybe 6 months later? So check any of these things. Which of these things do you already do for new members? I'm liking the results I'm getting. Lots of really cool things coming up here. Many of you do welcome emails. Great. You might be asking yourself, what does she mean about email instructions to access benefits? Well, sometimes we send an email and it just says welcome, but we don't always get clarity around how do you help somebody actually access those benefits. Great. Okay, let me share the poll. Let me share the responses that you guys had. So, the majority of you, a vast majority of you, are doing a welcome email and doing a personal invitation to the next event. Love, love, love that. I love that 31% of you are actually doing a call. Very cool, the personal interaction there. I think that the email instructions are great. What I'm looking at is the 0 under the interview. Now that's one of the surefire tactics that we have to create that warm welcome. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. First, let's share just some simple steps on a typical onboarding or welcoming program that you could actually apply into your chapter right away. Now, I love the fact at the top you guys you've nailed it. Almost every one of you said welcome email. That is really important because that's kind of the way that we're used to, right? We all have our mobile devices. Oh, look at this. I joined and Sharon or Lysandra gave me a welcome. That's awesome. I would suggest putting something in the mail along with that. I know that we're chapters, but how many new members do you get? Put a quick little note in the mail is great. Now, a number of you said call. I'm going to encourage you, email, mail, call. Pick up the phone and talk to some folks. Now, here's an easy one you can throw out there, a shout out. Now, a shout out is something as simple as on your website, on email, to a group of people, in your newsletter, social media, a shout out to your new members. Now, there's 2 chapters when I was looking around who do some really cool shout outs. This is from Oregon. It's about a year, maybe 2 years old. What I loved about this in their newsletter is this is sort of their shout out. They did a member spotlight, and I presume that they do this frequently. Anybody from Oregon on the call, do me a favor, type in and tell us a little bit more about your member spotlight. What I loved about this is here is a really cool shout out. Now, this turns out that this gal was apparently on the cover of Access magazine, but what I really just totally loved was you're just shining the light on a member. Here's another one from Utah. They have a blog. I really love this when I took a look at this. This was, just this past summer, they talked about this particular Heidi who does dental hygiene in a non-traditional setting. It's really, I think it's easy for us to do shout outs. It's easy for us to shine the light. And what that does, so for Heidi and for the other gal, it's telling them, oh my gosh, I mean something to these people. It's also helping your members connect connections with each other. Now, I do see that someone said, do we get a notice if someone joins to the local level? And I will ask the ADHA staff to go ahead and respond to your question, and we'll get you that answer. Now, I want to highlight, though, this last element, which is also the biggest, because that's what we want to talk about. When I referred to the fact that that the interview was not chosen by anybody, this is where we come to it. If we're going to create the connection, it's all well and good to do this kind of, mass emails and communications, a little bit of personalization there, a little bit of a shout out. But we have to be the facilitators of that connection, because the warmest welcome is actually getting someone involved in our organization. Let's talk a little bit more about that. It starts with us hitting the new members hot button. Now, let me just pause a moment and just say to you while we're having this conversation that anytime I say new before the word member, you could strike the new and go back to any renewing member or any unengaged member. So this process works absolutely with all of your members. But back to this, with a new member, it's really about hitting their hot button. So what do I mean by that? So every person that comes into your event, your organization, is coming in generally, as we said, for those connections and access. And they will articulate it in that they are either looking for an answer, they are looking for a person, or they are looking for a purpose. What do I mean by these 3 things? So an answer, they have a question about how they're doing their job or how they're navigating their career or how they should work with a particular vendor. They're looking for an answer. They got a question, looking for an answer. Or they're looking for a person. They could be looking for their next new hire. They could be looking for their next new job. They could be looking for a new solution provider. They could be looking for a mentor. Or they're looking for a purpose. That's right. Some folks are involved in a profession and they want to give back, right? Or they believe so passionately. And I imagine this would be really true about you guys. If you really believe in the importance of dental health, you may feel compelled to want to do volunteer work in the community. And you're saying, wow, I want to find a way to do volunteer work in the community that takes these hands, this knowledge, and applies it maybe at a community center or a housing community or in a community fair. And I'm looking for somebody that can help me facilitate that. That's a purpose. Maybe it's someone who says, I really want to build my speaking and facilitation skills. That's a purpose. So everybody is going to come to our chapter and they're going to want one of these 3 things. They're looking for that answer, for that person, or for that purpose. The warm welcome, the connection happens when we listen intently enough to know which of these 3 things are the hot button. And in listening, we're able to make that connection. So I gotta ask you, what's your opening question? How do you listen using these two more than this? How do you listen to find out those hot buttons? So you've got a chat. Some of you are doing a really great job here, going ahead and putting it in. Chat some of your opening questions. So let me give you a scenario. You're having an event. It's a little bit of continuing education and a little bit of networking, and I'm presuming that your new members, when they get their badges, they have something that says like a star that says I'm a new member, or a dot or something that lets you know. And this person walks in, and you're on the board, and you see this person, and you say, "Hi, Peggy, nice to meet you." What's your opening question? How do you find out more about that individual? So I'm looking to see some fast typing here. To get your thinking going, let me offer you three options. The first one, easy peasy, right? Why did you join? Okay? Now, when you ask why do you join, sometimes that leaves an open space and someone says, oh, yeah, no. So be ready to prompt them. So are you, yes, Pam, I love it. How long have you been a hygienist? I love that. Oh, Holly, wonderful. Tell me how you heard about our meeting. See, now you guys are typing. I'm loving this. I'm loving this. See, these are all great, easy opening questions, and be ready to prompt them. Now, if you want to get a little bit deeper, try, what career activities or issues do you anticipate needing to address within the next 2 years? Ah, Carmen, you are speaking to this next question. Thank you. And you ask it even simpler. What's your interest about hygiene? So here's the thing. Ask them, when they look at the next 2 years and they're thinking about their career and they're thinking about dental hygiene, what are the issues that they think that they're going to be facing or they're currently facing, right? And then what dental hygiene topics are you interested in? What I really love about this whole idea of creating your opening question is if you do a little bit of thought about this ahead of time, when you are in that position, it'll just come out sweetly out of your mouth and you'll be able to have a conversation. Now, are you looking for how do I ramp up these questions? Maybe these questions don't particularly work for you, but maybe you really like Carmen's question of what interests you about hygiene. Get your board together, and at the end of your board meeting, say, hey guys, let's brainstorm and come up with 3 really great questions to open up a conversation with a new member or a prospect so that we can get that person engaged or join and get them to brainstorm. And then you have a bunch of questions in your palm. Put it in your pocket the next time you're at an event or the next time you're on a call talking to somebody who's a new member or a prospect, and then you'll be able to have a conversation that opens it. Now, the reason why you want to have this conversation is because it gives you the opportunity to take the next step. Now, the next step is to take that answer and make a connection. Oh my gosh, Amy, I love it. Potential members, absolutely. What I really kind of dislike sometimes is on registration forms, we put members and non-members. What if you put members and our new member to be? Anyway, love it, Amy. Thanks for sharing that. So the connection really is for you to take what they wanted, an answer, a person, or a purpose, and I want you to connect them 3 ways. I want you to connect them with an activity that responds to that. That's an event, maybe it's a webinar, maybe it's a community service project, maybe it's a volunteering opportunity. But I want you to say, wow, let's say it's something about one of the techniques about dental hygiene. Maybe it's working with a person with disabilities, right? And I really, we're expanding our customer base, and what we've done is created a really great opportunity to work with this community outreach, and we're going to have more patients with disabilities, and I'm just really concerned about that. I want to have some best practices. And you can say, well, there's a webinar up on ADHA's site that connects you with that. That may be an option. Maybe there's an event coming up. We're actually at our conference in 3 months. We're actually going to have a session on working with people with disabilities. Maybe you're happy to be doing some outreach in the community, and you can say, well, actually, we're doing an outreach program in which we are going to be encountering some folks with disabilities. Let me pair you with one of our seasoned folks, and you'll see an opportunity to how to work with them. So give them an activity. Give them a resource. Now, in this particular case, you could say, by the way, you know, we do have an online community, and on the online community, we have a number of resources about this. So go to the website and see this. Go to the online community. Actually, we've got this really cool PDF that is the top 10 things to think about. I'm not sure you guys have that, but if you don't, you could get one. Let me send it to you. Maybe there's on your blog, there's been a blog post. Maybe there's a number of blog posts. You can point them to it. Maybe there's a newsletter article, but point them to a resource. Now, the interesting thing is if maybe you're not absolutely certain that there is a blog post or a newsletter, you could still say, hey, we've got a newsletter and we archive it, and there are lots of different kinds of articles like this. Let me give you the link to the newsletter. Okay? So you're giving them an activity, you're giving them a resource, and you're giving them a person. Do not miss this opportunity to connect them with someone else in your community or in your family. Maybe it's a connection to a member. So remember I talked about connecting someone. Maybe Carmen is really tremendous, and so you say, hey, I want you to meet Carmen because Carmen actually has worked with a number of patients with disabilities, and she's just got some great insight on this, right? And if Carmen's not in the room, or if you're on the phone call, you say, let me share with you Carmen's information, and then do an email intro. Hey, Carmen, I've been talking to Amy, and Amy's really interested, and I want to get the two of you together. Okay? So it could be a member. Maybe there's a supplier or a vendor or a medical props person that you can say, well, listen, I saw that XYZ, check this person out. Let me give you the introduction. It could be an educator. If someone's saying, I'm looking for some interns, or I'm looking for an opportunity to be really involved in the educational system, or I'm looking for an opportunity to get some continuing education. Well, let me point you to the educator that's part of our team that we know down the street, right? Maybe it's someone completely outside the circle, but someone that would answer this person's needs. And remember, when you do that, it doesn't matter that you've gone outside your circle to point them to someone. They remember they were inside the circle when they got pointed to, right? Right? They're going to remember that it was you. So here's the deal. I say 3 ways. For every particular question they have, say, hey, you know what? Let me give you 3 things you can do, because that's what this group is about. I'm going to give you an activity. I want to give you a resource. I want to give you a person. So a practical standpoint, how do you make this work? Go back to that board meeting or a great little ad hoc task force of members and say, okay, what are some of the typical answers we get when we ask that opening question? Brainstorm on responses for activity, resource, and person. So here in my chapter, for example, one of the most common things that we hear is people say, well, we have a lot of people that work in PR agencies, and so they're constantly about working with their clients, right? You know that, patients, clients, right? But they oftentimes have to prove their worth. So they've done something, and now they've got to prove the results. And so that's really in showing analytics, right? And so oftentimes we hear the same question about, oh, I need to demonstrate to my client the analytics of the PR. And so we've already brainstormed. We have a document on the website. Every conference, it's just a standard thing. We get a different speaker, but we always have a session on it at the conference. I always suggest that as an event. There is a really good webinar up on our national site, so I always can recommend that as an activity as well. It's an archived one, and members get free access to those archived ones. And we've got a couple of blog posts on it. We brainstormed that. That's a typical question we get. And so we sat down at the board and we came up with the things. And you won't always have an answer, but 9 times out of 10, you can come up with something that they can tap from a resource and a person. Make sense? Give it a try. Let me challenge you. Here, write a question and see if you can write in the chat box at least 2 of the 3 ways you could connect somebody. Let's do our own little brainstorming here. Somebody's asked, how do I work with, I don't know, give us a question. Someone give us a question here, and we'll play with it right now. Oh, and thank you, Carmen. I love this. Look in the mirror and ask yourself, why did I choose this profession? Wow. I love that. I love that. All right. So go ahead. Somebody be the first one. Post a question. How do I find volunteer opportunities? Excellent. Okay, folks. How do I get involved in advocacy? Oh, I love that one too. Okay. So all my folks on the phone here, what I want you to, on the call, on the webinar here, I want you to offer an activity, a resource, or a person to those 2 questions. Now, you can think about it like it's in my own chapter, or you can think about it as an entire ecosystem. But if someone came up to you and said, how do I find volunteer opportunities? Or if someone said, how do I get involved with advocacy? Go ahead. How would you answer them? With an activity, with a resource, or as a person? Type away. And as you do that, a person, okay? I'm going to throw up one other item here for you. Now, those of you who were with us, oh my gosh, how long ago? It was last year at the session in Ohio. I showed this on the screen. This is an engagement continuum, and I'm bringing it back here because sometimes finding the answers is a little tough, particularly around how do I get an activity, how do I get them connected into the organization. And I love what Pam just said. I would hook them up with the advocacy chair. So here's the deal. If you think in terms of an engagement continuum, and your board would sit down and find all the ways somebody could consume stuff about your chapter, meaning viewing, reading, attending, how they could get engaged with validating your association content or promoting it, how they can get involved with the creating, how they can get involved with the serving, how they can get involved with the board. If you do this, this becomes the map that allows you to be able to answer those questions more thoroughly. Oh, I love it. Glenda just put in, one of the things we're talking about was advocacy, and she suggested contact me for volunteer opportunities for Colgate Brights. I love that because that answers 2 things. It gives them an activity, right? But it also gives them a resource. Beautiful, beautiful. So if this engagement continuum helps you answer that question or plot out those responses, have at it. I think it helps us begin to think about this a little bit differently. This is simply a tool that you can use. I want to talk about 2 more tools. The next tool I want to talk about is a member profile. Carmen. Mercy, mercy indeed. So when I've sort of shared this very simple kind of process, I mean, at least I think it's simple because I've seen it work so simply. This notion of an opening question and finding what one of those 3 things are looking at or hot buttons are and then connecting to them. There's another kind of piece that helps us pull all of this together, and that is taking these questions and creating and building a member profile. This relates back to that first poll when I talked about the interview. If we create a member profile, it really helps us get even more intentional about how we respond to those 3 questions. And it helps us really help people find a deeper connection within the organization. So there's a couple of ways that we can do this member profile. One of the cool things is this member profile does even more than that. It can help us connect people into volunteering. I totally love the question that was like, well, how do I find out more volunteering opportunities? Well, if you take a member profile, and I'm going to show you 2 examples in just a moment. If you take a member profile and you build in all of these questions, what you're able to do then is not only take that question and point them to a list, but you'll be able to say, well, I understand based on what you're interested in, I'd like to introduce you to Susie, who is our advocacy chair, because she's really the person that can connect you to some of your passions and get a deeper relationship in the organization. So let me give you the examples to make sure how this works. This is Alpha Epsilon Phi. They call this a volunteer interest survey. Now, this can be adapted to your member profile. It can be a document that sits up on the website and you get somebody to respond to. It can be a document that a volunteer is using to ask questions. However you want to use it, what I want you to focus on is not the questions that they've asked on this first thing, but the questions they ask on the second part of it. So, please indicate your level of interest in the volunteering of any of these activities. What I love about this is they didn't ask, do you want to be on, pick the committee you want to be on. What they're really saying is, where is your interest? And they're also allowing you to say, I might be interested, but I'm not sure. When we ask people to pick a committee, they're going to pick the committee that they think that they know and match their interest. When we ask them, where might you be interested, they're going to go a little bit outside that. They're going to give you a little bit more information about them. So, for example, you've got marketing PR, you've got collegiate programming, alumni programming in this particular case. But what are you interested in any of these in particular? What I liked about this, again, is it gets away from the committee. So I'm seeing some questions about making sure that you can see the chat. The one question that I shared just a moment ago was actually came over the Q&A, which I'm the only one that can see the Q&A right now, so I apologize if that threw folks off. Let me show you a second one. Now, what I like about this is broader, and it's actually more focused on this whole idea of getting a bigger picture of the member. But I wanted to show both of you because that other one was pretty short, and it just kind of asked a general question. This one gets a little further. Now, again, this starts off with get involved. It does use the volunteer word. It depends on how you want to use this, right? You can go to www.aalas.org/get involved, and you can see this in action. I'm pulling this down. This will lead eventually to a Google Doc under how do I volunteer. The Google Doc starts with this really just very generic, are you a member? What I want you to look at, though, are the follow-up questions, because these may be questions that you can use in creating your member profile. Now, maybe you don't say to your volunteer position. Maybe you say, what skills and expertise can you bring or do you want to bring to the organization, right? But what I loved about this, and this is where I think its adaptability to you guys is really cool. Yes, there's generic things, communication, speaking, facilitating, subject matter expertise, financial management, operations. But they also put aquatics, biosafety, transgenics. You guys have some of those same kinds of buckets, right? You could throw that in here because their skills or experience in working with and I'm going to use the disabled population as one that just comes to mind, but it could equally be with kids, older Americans. It could be around any number of areas, working with, I don't know, with orthodontics. You guys fill those in, okay? But the idea here is that you're getting a sense of what's driving this person. They're obviously engaged. They've made the decision to give you that initial dollar, that initial payment, and that initial commitment of their time. Let's find out what is the skills and expertise they bring. I love, love, love this next one. What's your passion? In this particular case, again, this is laboratory science, right? So they did animal welfare, biomedics research, but then they also have the generics, public outreach, education and training, speaking, facilitating, policies, procedures. So what is your passion around dental hygiene, right? What is your passion related to this profession, related to this organization that we can help you connect? You see, these questions get at this idea of, I'm talking to an individual who made a decision to join. They are waiting for us to help them map the way. Because at the end of the day, people want this to be easier than it is. And our organizations are naturally complex. If I'm in Utah and I've joined this national organization and and the membership all the way through, that's a lot of space for me to understand, right? The idea of the onboarding and the warm welcome is to kind of get through that clutter. These two sets of questions alone make a tremendous difference. Now, in this particular one, I like the fact that they also just double check the degrees, the certificates, and licensures. That may not be appropriate to you, but maybe there's some other bit of information from a demographic standpoint that you don't regularly collect, and you just want to have an extra opportunity. So let's talk about how you would use this form. So in the case of AALAS, this is a Google Doc, and they connect people and they point people to fill this out, people meaning members, and they get them to fill this out. With PRSA Maryland, we have an open SurveyMonkey. Same thing. I tell people, please tell us a little bit more about yourself over here. So you could do that. What I really liked is what I heard a chapter from another organization out of Boston do. This form is actually in the hands of volunteers who call up members as part of the welcoming team and say, hey, Nancy, I see that you just joined. I want to give you a warm welcome. Guys, we're heading into the interview stage. Listen, I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions to get to know you, because part of what we want to do here in the Boston chapter is to make sure that we can make your decision to join a decision that makes sense to you. Got a couple of real quick questions. And then they use pretty much a form like this, and they capture the information. Now, as a practical matter, it could be a paper form, right? But it could just as easily be the volunteer on a SurveyMonkey, right? So the information goes in immediately in a place that's easy to collect and to use and to massage and to share and to cross-tab, right? It doesn't really matter whether this is a form. What it matters is that this is an interview that helps you connect. What's really neat about what we do here at PRSA Maryland is this interview, it feeds into our member spotlight. We do a member spotlight in our newsletter. It feeds into that. It feeds into our volunteer pool, because we then begin to help connections and make a difference, right? It goes, a few pertinent of these things go to the note. So when it's time for this person to renew, we can be really specific if we have to call them to get them to renew, we have some really good information about them and how to connect with them. It's beautiful because one call, one interview nets an article for our publication. It nets a lead for our volunteering, and it gives us information that allows us to make sure that person connects with the organization. Don't know if I've convinced you, but what do you think? Go ahead, type in, is this something you think you might be able to use in your chapter? Now, a question for you as you're typing in and thinking about that. How long should onboarding last? So, should your onboarding program be one touch, 1 to 3 months, 5 to 7 months, 12 months, longer than 12 months? And I see you guys typing in, okay. So the one touch is that email, one and done. It's getting that first quarter, which is that kind of a critical time, right? When you bought something, you want to have the outcome of it, right? So 1 to 3 months, 5 to 7 months, that's before they probably get their first renewal invoice, right? 12 months, just follow them for the year. Longer than 12 months, it goes outside of that. Yeah, Holly, great question. As we're all pulling in here, I had said to you, tell me if you think that you could use this, and she said, I don't know what format would work best for our state and local components. Right. So the interesting thing would be for you to bring this to the group and say, hey guys, the sky's the limit. We can do this simple. We can do this big. Let's find a way to make it work. All right, let me show you where people are. So the biggest answer was longer than 12 months. We had tie between 1 to 3 and 12, and we had some people saying 5 to 7. Congratulations, you all win, because nobody said one touch. I always say to folks, onboarding does not mean on board. So great. And actually, it is longer than 12 months. You see, for most people, the biggest drop-off is in year 1 or 2. And year 3, you begin to see a little bit of improvement. My sense is that the onboarding program needs to go on until you've got somebody really showing up and connecting, at least on a semi-regular basis. Now, not everybody's a come on out, right? So there's lots of ways to take a look at that. But yes, we should think, and actually the research coming out of the association space is that we ought to think about an onboarding program for 2 to 3 years. You guys are chapters. You've got limited time and limited resources. What I'm getting you, pushing you, encouraging you, nudging you to think about is that it's not a one and done, and it really needs to go at least until you've got somebody to an event and you've had a good follow-up conversation with them. And for some folks, given how busy our schedules are, that's going to take almost the 12 months. Let's hope it only takes that first quarter or that first 6 months. But if you guys can be dedicated to this notion of onboarding being an ongoing process, then we're able to have success in this. All right. I mentioned to you that I had a couple of additional tools. So just to remind you where we were, we talked about the member profile. I want to talk to you about how do you use your website. One of the critical things about, is that we're not going to reach everybody all the time. And so you kind of have to be in a lot of different channels, right? What I'm showing you here is a screen grab from a national organization, yes, but it's one of the coolest examples of how an association is showing how members connect into the organization. So for a moment, don't worry about that word volunteer up here. Instead, focus on the infographic. And let me blow that up a little bit for you here. What I really love about this is it says to members, there's a lot of ways you can connect with us. You can be on the board of directors or the talent council. But the members, just as a member, you can give us ideas, you can do trends, you can do research, best practices, case studies, right? Then they talk about some more formal things like the program planning council, the big mountain, right? There are streams that are member liaisons and relationship coordinating teams and strategic alliances and project teams. And then you still see in the background the board of advisors, the partners, the industry experts. What I love about this image is it creates this incredible view about this wonderful ecosystem, and we're all in this together. So I bring this to you because on your website, the degree to which you can show how people plug into your chapter. Now, go to, your local graphics department, your local school, or, maybe you've got someone's got a friend of a graphic, and say to them, listen, here are all the ways people can get involved in the chapter. Can you create a picture for us? But use your website. My big point to this is use your website to let people see how they can get connected, so that even if you miss them on the phone call, you can give them a chance to click and say, tell me more about something. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is a different way of approaching this, but I'm going to start by asking you this question. and I'm getting ready to put this up, so give me just a second. Okay, my poll is going to work in just a moment. Okay. So who handles your new member onboarding? It's the membership committee. So I'm thinking here you got a membership committee and you tell them part of their job is to bring in new members and to take care of those new members may come in. A welcoming committee. Maybe it's the board that does it. Maybe you don't have anybody yet. Maybe you've got a group and they sort of come and go. Membership committee, welcoming committee. Seeing some people coming in here, great. And oh, and I see Sheila, thank you. Yes, I love, Sheila was responding to how long should onboarding going, and I love this, that she says, as our careers and lives change, our interest, time, and priorities change. Yes, absolutely. And what's really cool about having a process that continually goes out and asks people and talks to them and interviews them is you know when they change and you can plug them in differently. Awesome. Okay, so we got a number of you, and things are slowing down. Anyone else want to log in here? Membership committee, welcoming committee, board, ad hoc, no one yet. Okay, we got another folks in. All right. Well, let me end the polling and show you what we've got. So the vast majority of you, 63% said membership committee. One of you has a welcoming committee. Now, I want to know who that is. If you don't mind raising your hand by typing into the message here and tell us a little bit more about your welcoming committee. So a number of you say the board, and some people haven't done anything yet. Well, I've got an idea for you that I think is going to be pretty cool, and I bet the person that's doing the welcoming committee has a great idea. Now, the membership committee people, I want to hear from you. Start sharing, folks. How do these groups work? How do they handle this onboarding process? Let me share with you an idea as we're doing that. One of the things that I actually found in a chapter in California a number of years ago is something called the member welcoming team. Member welcoming team. What this team did was it would embrace any new member that came in. It was responsible for that first initial email. Then they all wrote little quick notes. Like there was like about 8 or 10 people on this team. So the new member would get these 8 notes in the mail, right? One of them would be tasked with giving a phone call, personal phone call, and inviting the individual to a meeting and meeting them there, right? And at the time, either at that call or in person, they would interview them. They would learn more about them. That would be submitted to a profile. From that interview, from that wonderful interview, they would connect them with someone else in the organization. Then they would check back in 6 months with that individual and say, hey, how did it go? And make sure that person had connected. Now, the 6-month check-in might not have been with each and every one of those new members because the reality is some new members just got right involved. It was really for the new members that hadn't quite connected. What they did was they got rid of their member committee and they created the welcoming team. And the idea here was we will get new members in when we have more raving fans. And so they put their time and attention to that. Plus their membership committee had really been about making calls right before somebody just chooses not to renew. So here I say to you, if you want to make all of this work, is there a way that you could put together a member team? A way that you could put together a group of people whose whole job it is to be wonderful hosts and hostesses for your chapter. So I love Carmen saying each trustee of their components reaches out to new members in their area with an email and a welcoming letter. That is awesome. And then Linda mentions that any communication from association is a step in the right direction. Absolutely. And you know what? sometimes if we don't have the bandwidth to do anything more, I tell folks, you know what, I understand that. At least implement a really warm email and a personal note. So you can pick across any of these things what's going to work for you. But I suggest to you that if you do a member profile, if you get stuff up on your website, if you think about having a welcoming team, those three things can help you create a strong onboarding program. All right, guys. I'm totally loving the chat that's going on. Let me pause for a moment and ask you guys, what questions do you have about the conversation that we've had today? We've talked about a lot of different things. What questions do you have about really helping members create that pathway? So just as a real quick recap, as you recall, we started off by talking about the decision to join is about connections and about access. We talked about the fact that if you get that connection going, you wind up increasing that net promoter score. We talked about the key steps in onboarding process. We then took a look specifically at some questions you can ask to get the hot buttons connected to an activity, to a person, and to a resource. We talked about the member profile as a strategy. We talked about using your website, and we talked about the welcome committee. Carmen, great. Get new members engaged through social media. Real easy, Pete. So one of the things, actually, I'm so glad you brought that up. One of the things that I always recommend to folks is to, as soon as you get a new member, and this is, again, low-hanging fruit, look them up on Facebook, look them up on Twitter, look them up on LinkedIn, and connect with them. Connect with them. Yes, Tiffany. Someone did ask earlier if you get notifications from ADHA anytime someone joins, and I believe, I'm going to scroll back in the chat, that the answer was, if you check your rosters, the rosters will show the new members, and if you need more information, email us at member.services@adha.net. So thank you for asking that question, Tiffany. So, and you said I would like to do the same. Yeah, I think so. Here's the deal. If you get your roster and it shows the new members, that can be a trigger, right? That can trigger you to say your quick email, right? Exactly. And it could also, I love what Carmen said, you could then immediately say, where are they on, where are they on social media? Let me go ahead and connect with them. Confused about when or how to facilitate the interest survey. Do you do it when they join? Oh, okay. Well, Holly, thanks. So glad you asked that question. Yeah, so here's the idea about the interest survey. You can actually do it in whatever way works for your organization. So the one chapter that originally told me about this and demonstrated they were doing it, they had people that were calling, they were filling out a piece of paper. What I do at my chapter here is we have the interest survey is actually on a SurveyMonkey. There's a link from our website. What we do is we have a quick little email and we send the link in the email, and then we have a couple people that are making phone calls, and we reiterate the link on the phone call. So you could post on your website so people can just stumble across it and see it at any time. You can proactively send it out to people. Every now and then in our newsletter, for example, we post it again so people can do that, and people can tell us about that. Actually, interestingly enough, on our ballot, because we do an e-ballot for our board, we posted it on thing, and we said, also, if you'd like to get involved, fill out the interest survey. So if you create something online, a SurveyMonkey or a Google Doc or a Wufoo form, like, Wufoo, SurveyMonkey, and Google Doc all have free versions. We all love free. You can obviously use that link in a lot of different ways. one of the things that another chapter told me was that they have a Survey Monkey, and what they do is their welcome committee actually, when they're doing the interview, they're actually typing in so that they capture all the information there in a database, because that's obviously downloadable to an Excel spreadsheet. So I hope that helps you. I think part of what you're saying is if you leave a link, you hope people will go use it. Yeah. Have to be proactive with it. So here at Peggy mentioned, it goes into that in the web, tell board members about it so they can lead people to it. So you get to be a little proactive. But you know, we're getting started, and if the low-hanging fruit for you is to get that together and put that there, you know, take that as a first step. So Kathleen, that's a great question. Do you need to get permission from the individual? So it kind of depends upon how you do this. So if you have a social media account and someone joins and you follow them, there's no permission needed. And once they say yes, they are giving you essentially permission to have a conversation with them, and it's perfectly legit for you at that point to do a link with a shout out. So let's say, Linda, I'm with PAR. I'll say I'm with the Maryland ADHA, and Linda joins, and so I reach out to Linda, and we follow Linda on Twitter, and Linda follows us back, and then we can say, so excited to meet Linda, blah 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 blah. That would be perfectly acceptable. If you were going to publish a name of new members, typically on any particular membership application, there's a place where it says, gives permission for that. If there isn't, you could go out and ask somebody that. As a routine matter here at PRSA, we list all new members in our newsletter, but we list them name only. We don't list their employment, and we don't list any contact information, precisely because it provides some level of anonymity to them. So you don't need to necessarily get a permission. It's a good idea to get a permission if you feel like you're going to list them in a newsletter and you want them to know that. But understand that from a social media perspective, once that they've responded to you, you are good to go. Yes, I agree, Linda. Love that. I don't know, Amy. I see something does. I like how ADHA does a Member Monday. I think we do that. Yes, absolutely. And I bet you get some more information. Oh, and North Carolina does a Member Monday. Oh, so you guys got this going. All right. Very cool. Well, guys, we have got about 60 seconds left. I have had a great time talking about this with you. As you can see, I am passionate about this conversation, happy to stay conversing, but I got to do two quick plugs. One is the April webinar is going to be, we're going to pick a couple of really cool ideas from you all that you've picked up from these webinars. And the last webinar is going to be all about the stars of the ADHA community. What are you doing that makes a difference? So share your successes and be a star on that April webinar. So when you've taken something from our first one, which was about exceptional experiences, to this one, maybe you were at that wonderful conversation we had face to face. Maybe you've just done something, something else. Share us your successes. At the April webinar, we want to really be able to share what's going on with you all. Finally, we are going to have, the conversation has started on March 13th. Really great conversation. My business partner, Peter Halster, will be leading that. It's going to be an awesome conversation on communications and creating the conversation going. And then, of course, in April, we're going to have the 5 ideas to make your chapter shine. So, guys, we've done a lot of talking today. Love the chats, love the polls. Hope that you've got something that you're able to take away from today. As we come to a close, if there are any additional questions afterwards, the ADHA staff can share any of your questions with me. I'm happy to share. The slide deck will be made available to you. Connect with me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and let's keep the conversation going. It has been a real delight. Back to you guys, ADHA staff, and thank you again.